Take one of the podcast.
Hello, my name is Jillian Costello, and I'm joined here with my sister.
Hello, I'm Riley Costello.
And today, we're going to be talking about the simulation hypothesis. So, I was first introduced to the simulation hypothesis in my Philosophy 207 class about technology and the future of humanity. I know that my sister here has taken a couple of philosophy classes of her own, but didn't have anything to do with technology. So, do you want to open up about some of the classes you took?
Sure. I have taken a year of logic and moral ethics.
So what she's not as familiar as I am with the technological aspects, so we're just going to dive right in to what is the simulation hypothesis. So for a little background information, there are two kind of versions of the simulation hypothesis that we learned about. One is Bostrom's version, which is we are living in a computer simulation, and Chalmers, who created a book called Reality Plus, which we used for our class. That was our class reference book, if that helps you, Riley. And his version of the hypothesis is we are and always have been in an artificially designed computer simulation of a world. So what that means is basically goes just a little bit more in depth of rather than we're just living in a computer simulation, it says that our entire creation has been a computer simulation. And there could be multiple versions. The multiverse could be multiple versions somewhere on a hard drive, basically. The next thing is, what is a sim? And, usually when you hear sim, you're synonymous with The Sims 4. But in this case, it's a little bit different. So a sim is someone who is in a simulation. And there are two kinds of sims. One is a biosim, which is a biological being outside of the simulation in a spatial sense, who is connected to it. So are you familiar with The Matrix at all?
No, I am not.
All right. So basically, the main character, Neo, he interacts with his daily world, and it seems real, but he's in a computer simulation. And so have you ever heard of waking up from the Matrix? Have you ever heard some term like that?
No, I haven't.
So basically that means he took, there was the red pill, blue pill. He took the pill. I haven't seen the movie in a while, so I couldn't tell you which pill he took. But he basically woke up, and turns out he was living in a computer simulation. And when he woke up, he was in this kind of incubator almost. And he had a wire connected to his hands, his legs, his neck. And he was kind of in an egg almost. So he was living in a computer simulation, but he was a real biological being outside of it. And so the second type of sim is a pure sim. And that is there are simulated beings who are wholly inside of the simulation. So think of basically The Sims. So that is a simulated being who is wholly in a simulated environment, and there are no possibilities for a biological being to interact with them, basically. So, and with that, there are two different simulation versions, two different kind of simulations we're in. So, one could be a pure simulation where everything inside of it happens to be simulated. Again, think of The Sims. And an impure simulation would be a simulation including elements, biological sims, that are not from the simulation. So again, think The Matrix, even though you're not really familiar with it. So with that background information, we're just going to dive right into the main argument. Is it likely we are in a simulation? So a couple examples and ideas of the theory, one by Hans Moravec, stated that robots will recreate us statistically. It is way more likely we are living in a simulation than the original version. So a little bit more about that. It just means that there is a higher likelihood of us, there's only one reality, one real reality. And so mathematically speaking, it is more highly likely that we are in the reality that was artificially created than the reality that is the one real one, if that makes sense. So, and another viewpoint is by Elon Musk. He just worded it a little bit differently because Moravec was from, I think, the 50s, but I'm not sure. Elon Musk stated that we have video games that are on track to be indistinguishable from reality with different video game formats like set-top box, so think your PS4, Xbox, or PCs, so personal computer. And the odds that we're in base reality, which Elon Musk says is the one real reality, would be 1 in billions. So the argument is if at least 1 in 10 non-sim populations will create 1,000 sim populations, and if at least 1 in 10 non-sim populations will create 1,000 sim populations, then at least 99% of intelligent beings are sims. And if at least 99 of intelligent beings are sims, we're probably sims. So we are probably sims. So that's the argument. And it was an argument by Chalmers, and it was just kind of like speaking on the math aspect of it, because we already went over different, kind of the terminology and everything. And basically, it just states that statistically, if 1 in 100 sims created 1,000 sims, I couldn't do the math right now and tell you the exact answer, but chances are we're not that 1% that is real. We are the 99% that are not real. And again, it's kind of like we had this example in class where it was like if we had COVID, right? And let's say there were 99% of people who had COVID on campus and 1% didn't. Do you really think that you're going to be that 1% who did not have COVID, or are you going to be that 99% who do have COVID, or who did have COVID? Kind of like that, if you want to think of it.
From my experience, I thought that for a theory to be meaningful, it must be testable.
That is one way to look at it. Rudolf Carnap actually had some similar thoughts too. He was a philosopher from Austria, I think in the early 1900s. And his thing is kind of along with the scientific means too, like a scientific way of looking at things, that you have to find evidence. It has to be testable. There must be substantial evidence for or against this for the theory to be true. That's true for a lot of scientific hypotheses and everything. But then again, if you think back to the Big Bang, there's no way for us to test the Big Bang actually happened. There's no way to gain substantial evidence about that, but it's still a widely accepted theory. Also, just because it's not a scientific theory and it's not a scientific hypothesis doesn't mean that it can't be a philosophical hypothesis, because in philosophy it's all about asking questions, and rarely does everybody agree on the answer to one of those questions. So even if the theory isn't testable in the scientific sense, it's still a valuable theory, as there is, thought experiments behind it and statistics and mathematical, I wouldn't say evidence, but mathematical thoughts behind it. And if we were in a pure or perfect simulation, a pure perfect sim would also not think that they are in a simulation unless they were given that information by the simulators, by the creators. So for all intents and purposes, we could be in a pure simulation.
Yeah, but Sims cannot be conscious, can they?
That's a very great question. And many philosophers believe that consciousness is what makes us special as humans and what makes us who we are and everything. Consciousness is a wildly debatable theory, especially in philosophy. And many philosophers believe that only biological beings and systems can be conscious, and simulations cannot be conscious. So that would be an obvious sign that we are not in a simulation. However, What if we are biosims connected to a simulation via the Matrix? I know you're not really familiar with the Matrix, but in this case, it would rule out pure sims for the time being. But, in the Matrix, they are biological beings hooked up to a simulation, However, in a perfect I'm going to switch gears a little bit of the biosims. In a perfect simulation I did go over that in a perfect simulation, our world is exactly modeled after the base reality, so there's really it's really undistinguishable between the two. The pure sims would be programmed to think and act exactly as those in base reality, making it possible that pure sims in a perfect simulation could very well be conscious, just in a different way. They are modeled exactly after we are in base. Well, I shouldn't say we are, as I'm not proving that. If they are modeled, perfectly after base reality, who's to say they can't be conscious? Who's to say that consciousness is just limited to biological beings? We don't know that yet. So again, that is why we cannot disprove it.
Well, I'm familiar with Descartes' work and his deceivement argument. So if there is an external world, then we cannot be in a simulation.
And that is a very popular argument against the simulation. However, let's be real. His argument of building back up his argument, placing everything on God and how everything like that, very weak argument. That's just my opinion. How God is a perfect being, and perfect beings would not let us be deceived. I still think that's a very weak argument, but I can't argue with somebody who's dead. But he says that a perfect being would not let us be deceived, and therefore would allow our impressions of the external world to be accurate. But we have to take into account, eventually simulations will become a reality. We are already on a freight train heading in that direction. And potentially in the future, we could create, test, and run a sim Descartes. Oh! So for an explanation on what just happened, my sister and I have an inside joke because I pronounced Descartes' name wrong when I read it out loud, and ever since then we joke that it's Descartes. So I had a Freudian slip of the mind there. I'm so sorry, but we could create and run a sim Descartes, and he could have the same theory that his creator is perfect. However, if we're his creators, we are imperfect beings. And in fact, as the beings who created the simulation he is in, which would not be a perfect world. So his argument and, the theory or the argument he builds back up after his tear the whole house down would be entirely false. And even if there is a perfect God who created us and, created us, who we created the simulation, who then created Sim Descartes, he had a hand indirectly in that creation of the simulation with Sim Descartes.
But Descartes could object that there is no simulation of it yet.
Yeah, that is true. And that is a very good argument. But at the end of the day, we are having technological gains that are unprecedented, that were unprecedented even 40 years ago. I know that there's, I can't think of the theory name now, but it's like every 2 years technology gets, like, you have more data in a smaller thing. I know it's a theory I learned in computer science. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but technology is just advancing in a rapid pace, a rapid time. And maybe the perfect God that Descartes has and, theorized would interject and not allow us to deceive him. So, maybe there is a perfect God out there, but that's not what I'm trying to do here today. But also his arguments came into question because it begins to question, his beliefs of the external world. So, we can't prove that the external world can be trusted. We can't rely on he couldn't rely on his senses, so therefore, how could he rely on his perfect being argument? As we don't know if there is a perfect being, and we do not know what we do not know. We do not know if we are in a simulation or if we are not in a simulation. So essentially, to basically reword what I said previously, we can't prove that we are in a simulation, and we cannot prove that we are not in a simulation. But just because we can't prove or disprove it doesn't mean we should throw out the theory entirely. It's more so, it wouldn't be something to dwell about and think like, oh my God, like life is so bleak, because there are so many amazing things to offer in this world, even if it is just a simulation. But just because it can't be proved or disproved doesn't mean that it should be thrown in the garbage entirely. And it should be given some credit to where it's due, because we are, I play The Sims and everything. I run my simulations. And ever since this project, I was like, well, could they be not conscious, but do they have feelings? They obviously do. I try to keep my Sims happy. And it made me, try to be a better creator for them and not let so much misfortune happen to them on my watch. I try to be more kind and compassionate, because I said to myself, well, if I'm in a simulation and I'm running a simulation, I would want the creators to be compassionate to me. So that made me more compassionate to my virtual online NPCs. And again, there is enough evidence already, mathematically and statistically, for the odds to be high enough that we are in a simulation. Again, if one non-sim creates 100 sims who then create 100 sims, that's 100 times 100. Would that be 1,000? No. Maybe 100,000. Is that more right? I'm not a math person, so please bear with me. But it is statistically more likely that we are that sim than that non-sim. And, the math isn't lying. So we should be prepared to think like, well, maybe we're not as special as we originally thought. I do believe humans have special inherent qualities, but maybe we're not as original. Maybe we're not the original ones. We're just a simulation in a hard drive somewhere. So therefore, it's not far-fetched to come to the conclusion that we are possibly in a simulation right now. And it is my personal belief that we are in a simulation. I don't know about my sister here. I'm not going to speak for her. What are your thoughts?
I think we very well could be.
Ooh, I changed someone's mind today. Woo woo.
Yes. This was a fascinating talk, and I learned so much, especially studying about what makes a being a being. And
I know they do that little theological stuff at PC.
Yes,
over there.
The theological philosophy aspect. So this was very eye-opening, and I learned quite a lot.
Well, we love to hear it. I personally, ever since I took this class, found philosophy very fascinating. Started listening to my own Stoicism podcast from it. But yeah, I'm glad I could, pick your brain a little bit. And again, thank you for coming on here and talking with me for my class. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, well, I guess this is it. Thank you for listening.